What is a rights? Rights are legal, social, or Hello mga kakognizants, welcome back to my channel, and for today's video I will discuss about the fundamentals or concepts of human rights. It is one of the topics under human rights education. So what is human? A human is a human being, especially a person as distinguished from animals. It is being relating to or belonging to a person or to a people as opposed to animals. It is a definition coming from Wikipedia. So pasabot na niya, human is a rational being. So meaning it is different from animals. Of course, naay rights ang human nga wala sa animals. Naay katungod ang usa ka tawo nga wala sa animal. So mo na siya itong i-discover as we go along with our discussion, because we already know that human is of course different from animals. Now, what is a rights? Rights are legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom or entitlement. That is, rights are the fundamental normative rules about what is allowed of people or owed to people according to some legal system, social convention, or ethical theory. So, pasabot of the word rights, it is an entitlement. Pasabot, imuha na siya nga katungod. Imuha na siyang katungod nga mabuhi ka. See, for example, imo nang katungod nga na kay kagawasan. That is your entitlement to become a person, to become a human being. Na kay entitlement to exercise such rights, which is vested upon you by the Constitution or by some legal system. So, muna siya gitawag na tog rights, katungod nimo isip usa ka tawo. Now, what is education? Education is the process of facilitating learning or the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, morals, beliefs, and habits. Educational methods including teaching, training, storytelling, discussion, and directed research. So, gitawag siya education, it's because of the systematic process. It is the systematic way of learning. Kaya kung ingon mong og makakat-on ta or learning, pwede mo ta makakat-on in any other way. See, for example, ang usa ka mekaniko nga nag-ayo sa motor, wala man na siya nag-eskwela about sa pag-ayo sa motor, but nakakat-on siya on his own way unsaon niya pag-ayo sa motor. But when we talk of education, it is a kind of learning ganing agi ta og systematic process nga, say for example, na ay mga memorandum coming from the Commission on Higher Education to follow certain curriculum nga ipang offer sa eskwelahan nya mo na sa sundon para naay unity or naay gitawag na to nga organize sa among all schools who offered such courses. So mo na siya, it's a process of facilitating learning. Lain siya nga kinds of learning when you talk of education. Whereas kung mingon ta og learnings coming from your experience sa imong kaugalingon nga skills nga develop, is dili siya ma-consider na to as a systematic way of learning. Nasabdan, basta mag-istorya tag education, it is a systematic way of learning, a process of facilitating of learning or acquisition of knowledge or skills. Now, what is human rights? Human rights are moral principles or norms for certain standards of human behavior and are regularly protected in the municipal and international law. So of course, mingon tag human rights, so mo na siya tawhanong katungod. Imuha na siyang katungod nga gikan sa pagkahimugso nimo ning kalibutan na pag-inom pa nila, gikan sa imuhang pagkatao hantod sa imuhang kamatayon, and even you are in the side sa imuhang womb sa imuhang ginikanan. Nagigala from womb to tomb. Gikan sa imuhang pag-conceive sa imuhang mama na nakay kaugalingon na nagkagitawag nga tawhanong katungod hantod sa imuhang kamatayon. Muna gitawag nato nga human rights. Ha? Kasi mangutana mo kana sa nagsugod ang imuhang tawhanong katungod, of course from womb to tomb. Ha, baliko nako, from womb to tomb. Gikan sa imuhang womb sa imuhang mama hangtod nga mamatay ka, na kay gitawag nato nga human rights. And such human rights as provided under the municipal international law Based on my previous discussion, nag-istorya na ako about Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where we are bound to follow those international standards of human rights law nga atong gi-apply diri sa Pilipinas. And of course, ni-adapta by way of having a 1987 Constitution which provides the civil and political rights and of course the social, economic, and cultural rights of a person. So mo na siya gitawag na to og human rights. Okay? Now let us proceed to fundamentals. What do you mean by fundamentals? Fundamentals, it serves as a basis in supporting existence or determining essential structure or function. It serves as an original or a generating source or of relating essential structure, functions, or facts of central importance belonging to one's innate or ingrained characteristics of relating to or produced by the lowest component of complex vibration. Meaning to say fundamentals, from the word fundamentals, ang imong mahunan is the foundation. Ang pundasyon, it is a central importance. Meaning to say, ang paghimo sa usa ka or ang paghatag og tawaghanong katungod is diha nagagikan ang pundasyon nga kinahanglan siya nga tagaan og importansya. It must be given central importance aron dili ma-violate ang imuhang tawhanong katungod. Kay kung dili lig-on ang pundasyon, dali ra na siyang maguba. Si for example, naghimo ka og balay pero kuwang og pundasyon. Kung naay bagyo, naay hangin, maguba. The same true with the human rights. Kinahanglan ang pag-create sa human rights o ang pag-respect nimo sa human rights must have the so-called fundamentals. Must have a strong foundation. It must have a central importance para siya tagaan og bili. Tagaan siya og gibug-aton nga i-follow to those person nga nag-implement og mga laws or the government itself sa pag-implement niya in order not to violate the rights of a person. Nasabtan, now let us proceed to concepts. Concepts are defined as ordinary ideas or general notions that occur in the mind, in speech, or in thought. They are understood to be the fundamental building blocks. They are understood to be fundamental building blocks and concept behind the principles. Thoughts and beliefs deeply an important role in all aspects of cognition. So kini ang concepts is nagmold ni siya, nagkuyog ni siya sa usa ka foundation. Si foundation nga niya nga atong istoryahan is of central importance which the concepts is the building blocks. So for example para dali masabtan, kung mag-istorya ta og kamuti Q, kamuti Q. Ang iyang concept, ang imong makita niya is of course the kamuti Q itself. But kung imo siyang tan-aw ang iyang kinaunuran, iyang concept, ang iyang concept itself nga nahimo siya kamuti Q, it's because nagikan siya sa kamuti. So muna siya kitawag tong concepts. Mao na siya naghatag og building blocks nga ma-form ang imong foundation into a strong foundation in relation sa pag-apply nato sa human rights. Thus concepts nga atong giistoryahan is kinahanglan siya connected sa atong foundation. Para ang foundation nga imong gihimo sa human rights is muigo, muigo ngadto sa konsepto nga gustong i-implementar nga para ihatag sa mga katawhan para ma-exercise ang ilang rights without any violation. Now let us proceed to principle. What is a principle? A principle is a proposition or value that is a guide for behavior or evaluation. In law, it is a rule that has to be or usually to be followed. It can be desirably followed or it can be inevitable consequence of something such as the laws observed in nature or the way that a system is constructed. So, pasabot sa principle, mao na siya gitawag nato karon nga mga theory, mga prinsipyo or nahimo siya law in which those foundations, the fundamentals and the concepts nga gi-exercise ganiha, nga gihatag sa tawhanong katungod is applyan na sa principle para mahibaw-an nato nga such human rights nga gi-violate is matagaan siya nato og pagtagad. Kay tungod nanay nag-prohibit, nanay naghatag og rule, nanay naghatag og balaod nga gi-violate siya and then there is a corresponding punishment with those act nga ni-violate sa imuhang tawhanong katungod. Muna atong gitawag og principle is a guide for behavior or evaluation. So diha ta magbase sa principle. And of course, kay naa may principle, di naa nahitabo nga naay law, naay law, therefore naay matawag na to nga violation on the human rights. Now let us proceed. What are the fundamentals or concepts of human rights? So, we have the economic, social and cultural, civil and political rights. So, when we talk of economic, social and cultural rights include the human rights to work, the right to an adequate standard of living, including food, clothing, and housing, the right to physical and mental health, the right to social security, the right to a healthy environment, and the right to education. So, kining economic and social and cultural, of course, i-apply na to diri sa Philippines, makita na sa itong constitution. And in fact, ang kana siyang gitawag na to economic and social, mao na siya itong gitawag nga nakay right nga magkaroon ka na or makabaton ka og kinabuhi nga nakay kasaganahan ba, nga nakay katungod nga mo eskwela, nakay katungod nga limpyo ang imong environment, nakay katungod nga mabuhi ka by way of having economically, nakay kanang pangwarta nga makasustain ka sa imong kinabuhi. Next is the civil. Civil rights include ensuring people's physical and mental integrity, life and safety, protection, and discrimination on grounds such as race, gender, national origin, color, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion or disability, and individual rights such as privacy, freedom of thought and conscience, speech and expression, religion, praise, assembly, and movement. So this again, these civil rights is also provided under our constitution, which provides those following rights nga ako ang ipang-mention. So, don't worry, discuss na ako as we go along with my discussion. So, political rights include natural justice, such as rights of the accused, including the right to fair trial, due process, right to seek redress or legal remedy, and the right or participation in civil society and politics, such as freedom of association, the right to assemble, the right to petition, the right of self-defense, and the right to vote. So, these civil and political rights is makita nato sa itong gitawag nga Article 3 of the Bill of Rights sa 1937 Philippine Constitution. Diha, gi-provide na diha nga you have the right to kanang remain silent, right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, right to have a counsel. If you cannot afford one, the government will provide. So, that is one of kanang ingon na to rights of the accused. So, right to fair trial, of course, kinahanglan nga wala siya gitawag nato og bias or gitawag nato inequality in providing a justice or in giving justice to both parties. That is why sa akong giingon based on my discussion about the equal protection clause and the due process clause, the justice system in the Philippines is represented by the lady justice who is nga gi-blindfolded siya. Why? Nganong gi-blindfolded man siya para kay mahibaw-an gyud nga there was fairness, there was equality in the promulgation of judgment. Now, what are the core principles of human rights? First, we have the universal and inalienable. Human rights are universal, inherent to every individual without discrimination. Inalienable, meaning that no one can take them away. So, indivisible and interrelated with all rights having equal status and being necessary to protect the human dignity. Education is a right and a multiplier of other rights. So, may universal. Ang imuhang rights is applicable sa tanan. Applicable sa tanan. Bisan pag maupaw ka, bisan pag maputi imong buhok, bisan pag mabungol, mabuta, maunsa pa man ang imuhang discrepancy, maunsa pa man ang imuhang physical defect, maunsa pa man ang imuhang status sa kinabuhi, mapobre man kag madato, universal ang human rights. Universal. Kung imong tan-awon, for example, ang bata nga bagong nagkatao, bisan pa og dili pa na parehas nimo nga nanakay buhok daan o panay ngipon, still naa na siya gitawag nato og human rights. Because again, human rights is universal. Inalienable, meaning inalienable, this cannot be taken from us. Dili na pwedeng mahikaw nimo, dili na pwedeng makuha nimo. But such inalienable rights is not absolute. Say for example, the right to liberty. What if nakasala ka? What if nakapatay ka? Of course, ma-deprive ang imuhang right to liberty. Kaya nga naman, nakakumit na makaog sa krimen, nakakumit naman ka og crime which kinahanglan ka nga i-incarcerate because of the offense you committed. So, nagdili siya mingon na to nga absolute ang ihang right, o nga to ang human right. Nasa certain limitations. It depends upon the situation where a person nga makakumit siya og krimen. Next is interdependent and indivisible. All human rights are indivisible or interdependent. This means that one set of rights cannot be enjoyed fully without the other. For example, making progress in civil and political rights makes it easier to exercise economic, social, and cultural rights. So pasabot ani niyang interdependent and indivisible as one of the concepts of, or one of the core principles of human rights is that kinahanglan na siyang right is dili na siya nimo magbuwag. Kinahanglan nimo na siyang kuyugon, ha? Dili siya matawag nato nga can be separated from each other. So dili daw na siya nimo pwedeng i-separate kay para mahatag na nimo siya nga kanang tawhanong katungod. See for example, right to life. Kung na kay right nga mabuhi, niya gihikawan ka sa pagkaon, kay di ka pakanon. Do you think mabuhi pa ka nga di na makapakanon? So therefore, para mabuhi ka pakanon ka, that is why mo na gitawag nato nga interdependent and indivisible. Kinahanglan magkuyog siya aron ma-exercise ni mong right. Nasabtan. Mo na gitawag nato nga indivisible or interdependent. Kinahanglan magkuyog siya. Okay? Now, equal and non-discriminatory. The general principles of equality and non-discrimination is a fundamental element of international human rights laws. Thus, the right to equal treatment requires that all persons be treated equally before the law without discrimination. So, mo na siya. Based on may giyon ako ganihang nga universal nga tanan applicable ang human rights. The same true with equal and non-discriminatory nga tanan, ha? Treated alike. Muna gitawag nga equality protection of laws. Madato man ka, mapobre, mapink man imong color, mablow man imong color, ma-orange man imong color. Bisag kung sa imong color, tanan protected siya from the government. And you have your own choice. Ha? Dili pwede nga magbuot ko kay ako mo'y naay power and authority within that certain jurisdiction. Ako'y masunod. Akong pilion nga color is itom. So dili pwede. Ha? Na may equality. And na kay freedom to select your own choice. Ha? Mo na nga kinahanglan tagaan og equality ang tanan because that is one of your protected rights under the Constitution. Then, both rights and obligations. Human rights entail both rights and obligations. The obligation to respect means that the state must refrain from interfering with or curtailing the enjoyment of human rights. The obligation to protect the required state to protect the individuals and groups against rights and abuses. So, of course, kinahanglan. To respect means the state must refrain from interfering with, curtailing the enjoyment of human rights. So, kinahanglan ang mga obligations and rights nimo kinahanglan protected gihapon na siya kay namo gunay corresponding punishment or penalties once your rights is being violated by any other person. Of course, pwede siya ma-civil liability, civil damages ang iyahang pwede nimong ma-cause of action against that person nga ni-violate sa imong rights and obligation. So wala siya ang core principles. Now let us proceed to what are the two major categories of human rights. Of course, it is the civil and political rights, social and economic rights. So, as what I have mentioned earlier about the civil and political rights, it is a class of rights that protect individuals' freedom from infringement by government, social organization, and private individuals, and which ensures one's ability to participate in civil and political life of society and state without discrimination or repression. So, I think right to vote part of your political rights. So, kung mingon tawag right to vote, of course, kinang dili ka i-discriminate, dili ka i-repress, or dili ka i-suppress. Ha? Kinahanglan, you have your own choice. As what I have mentioned, you have your own choice to exercise that certain rights. Right to freedom of expression. So, your freedom of expression is dili na sa absolute. So, as what I have observed, daghan kayong maghatag og mga expression nila base sa iyang nakita sa society which pwede na siyang maka-commit og krimen against another person or it will prejudice the rights of other person kay tungod sa iyang expression nga tungod sa iyang pag-express sa iyang kaugalingon is naka-commit na siya libelous act. Say for example, nakahimo na siya og mga gitawag nato nga mga sakit nga mga istorya or mga pagpakauwaw against sa iyang isig katao, then pwede ka ma-held criminally and civilly liable. Because your freedom of expression as part of your civil rights and political rights is not absolute. It is subject for certain limitation. So magbantay mo ana, magbantay ta ana kay kung magpasagad ta og tabi without any legal basis, without any justifiable grounds, basin kita pa'y maamong. And in fact, dili ta magpadala sa pag-inon pa nga sa bugso ng damdamin nga ako ang candidate for this coming election is si Juan de la Cruz, ako si Pedro, then makig-fight ko against sa iyahang mga supporters. No, just lang yang being neutral. Just kan mauram na imuhan, be neutral. Ayaw pag apil-apil sa mga issue in which wala kay exact knowledge, and then mo commit na mo result na into commotion, mag-away na mo, din kinsay alkansi kamurang duha. Ngano mo toy kalibutan tong inyohang giaway-awayan dito, di gina ka mamuling siguro makadaog na. Muna isod sa hunahuna, na ayaw padala sa bugso ng damdamin kay wala. Again, balik ko na ako mga abutan na it's because of your right, your freedom of expression. Again, that is subject for certain limitation. Just stay neutral. Nya observe, nya ugnay kayuhan, mas maayo og wa ra gihapon. Now let us proceed to social and economic rights. Economic, social, and cultural rights include the human rights to work, right to an adequate standard of living, including food, clothing, and housing, right to physical and mental health, the right to social security, the right to a healthy environment, and the right to education. So of course, kinahanglan ka nga maka-eskwela, kinahanglan ka na trabaho, right to work. Ningon gani ko, based on equal protection clause, ningon ko nga the right to work is one of your property right. Di ba? And because you have the right to work, of course, na kay right to sustain a living. Nga naman, kay tungod na makatrabaho, makasustain na makakaon naman ka 3 times a day. Then kung nakatrabaho, naka-income, maka-eskwela ka. So mo na siya ang gitawag na social and economic rights. Nakay right nga makakaon, including food, clothing, makapalit ka og sinina. Right nimo nga puyo ka sa balay nga pinaagi sa imong pupuning kamot. So that is your right to have a standard way of living, a decent way of living. That is your right. As long as ang imong means is coming from the legal sources, walay magbuot nimo ana. But kung magikan sa illegal sources, of course, again, dili na sag maingon nato nga this right is absolute. Again, tanang rights is subject to certain limitations. As long as you will not prejudice the rights of others, as long as wala kay na-commit nga krimen or any violation against the law of the land, then you can exercise your rights or human rights. So what are included in civil and political rights? So civil rights includes in securing people's physical and mental integrity, life and safety, protection from discrimination on grounds such as sex, race, and social orientation. So kung imo ni siyang basahon tanan kung say nasa imong civil rights, parehas lang nasa pagprotektar sa imong kanang gitawag nga to nga right to life, right to liberty, and right to property. Napay age, political affiliation, speech, religion, katong gingon nga right to freedom of the press, nasa kay freedom of religion. So inig-abot ako, I will discuss more about freedom of religion, about freedom to act on one's belief and freedom to believe. Asa ana ang absolute, between the two. It is the freedom to believe or freedom to act on one's belief. So muna siya ato i-discuss on the next uploaded video about human rights education. Then political rights include natural justice such as the right of the accused, including the right of fair trial. So ako na siyang i-discuss ganiya about sa political right nga on my previous slides. Next is civil and political rights from original and main part of international human rights. They comprise the first portion of 1948 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and cultural rights comprising the second portion. The theory of 3 generations of human rights considers in this group of these rights to be the first generation rights, and theory of negative and positive rights considers them to be generally negative rights. So I already also mentioned about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the Philippines are bound to follow based on that declarations. So what are included in the economic social rights? So economic social rights such as right to education, right to housing. So ako na siyang gi-explain ganiha about that right nga na-appeal siya sa economic and social right. As long as ang muigo gani diha is to sustain a living, is to have a decent way of living, a standard way of living, then that right is considered as an economic and social rights. So I hope you understand this very brief and concise discussion on the fundamentals and concepts of human rights. Thank you and God bless.